He walked onto a warship wearing the uniform of a doctor. The men around him believed he was trained. They believed he was qualified. They believed that if the worst happened, this man could save their lives. His name, they were told, was Dr. Joseph Sear. He was calm. He was confident. He looked like he belonged. But there was one terrifying problem. He was not Dr. Joseph Sear. He was not a surgeon. He had no formal medical training, and the identity he was using belonged to a real doctor somewhere else. Yet somehow, in the middle of the Korean War, when wounded men were carried onto the ship and there was no one else to turn to, this fake doctor was forced to do the one thing every imposter fears most. He had to perform. This is the story of Ferdinand Waldo Damara, the man who built an entire life on borrowed names, stolen trust, and impossible lies. Welcome to the Scam Files. Ferdinand Waldo Damara Jr. was born in Massachusetts in 1921. But the strange thing about Damara is that his real name became almost the least important part of his life. Because for most of his adult years, he did not live as one person. He lived as many. A monk. A teacher. A prison official. A psychologist. A lawyer. A researcher. And, most dangerously, a doctor. Each new identity gave him something he seemed to crave more than money: respect. Damara was not a normal thief who broke into houses or stole wallets in the dark. His crimes were built on something quieter. He walked into places where he did not belong and convinced people that he had always belonged there. That was his gift. He understood that most institutions run on trust. A uniform creates trust. A title creates trust. A confident voice creates trust. A piece of paper with the right name on it can open doors that should have stayed locked. And Damara learned how to use all of it. Long before he became famous as a fake doctor, he had already practiced the art of becoming someone else. As a young man, he joined religious orders. Then he left them. He entered the military. Then he vanished. He moved through jobs, institutions, and professions under names that were not his own. When one identity collapsed, he did not stop. He simply became someone new. This is what made him so dangerous. He was not just pretending for one day. He was building whole lives out of lies. In the early 1950s, Damara met a real Canadian doctor named Joseph C. Sear. Sear had qualifications. Sear had medical credentials. Sear had exactly the kind of identity Damara wanted. So Damara did what he had done so many times before. He got close enough to the truth to steal it. Using Joseph Sear's name, he presented himself to the Royal Canadian Navy. At the time, Canada was involved in the Korean War, and medical officers were needed. That urgency became the crack in the system. Under normal conditions, credentials might have been checked more carefully. Backgrounds might have been investigated. Someone might have made a phone call. But in war, things move quickly. And Damara understood one of the oldest weaknesses in any system. When people are desperate to fill a role, they may stop asking the questions that protect them. He arrived as Dr. Joseph Sear. He offered his services. And somehow, the man who was not a doctor became a surgeon lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Navy. He was eventually assigned to HMCS Cayuga, a Canadian destroyer serving in Korean waters. On paper, he was the ship's doctor. In reality, he was a man trapped inside his own lie. At first, the danger was manageable. He could handle routine sick calls. He could rely on medical books. He could ask questions in a way that made other people feel useful instead of suspicious. He could lean on assistance. He could use confidence as camouflage. For small medical problems, he could survive. But a warship is not a quiet office. It is a place where one bad day can expose every weakness. And that day came when wounded men were brought aboard the Cayuga. Suddenly, Damara was not just signing papers. He was not just wearing a uniform. He was not just pretending in a hallway. Men were bleeding. Lives were at risk, and the crew expected their doctor to act. This was the moment that should have destroyed him. Instead, it made the legend. According to accounts of the case, Damara rushed to medical textbooks and studied what he needed as quickly as he could. He read. He memorized. He prepared. Then he stepped back into the role he had stolen. He treated serious wounds. He performed procedures that included removing a bullet and amputating a foot. He had already handled smaller medical work, including dental problems. And the most unbelievable part is this. The patients survived. The crew did not see a fraud. They saw a calm and capable doctor under pressure. His fellow officers were impressed. Some even considered recommending him for a medal. But that attention was exactly what Damara could not afford. A con artist survives in the shadows. Praise can be more dangerous than suspicion, because praise spreads the story. The story reaches newspapers. Newspapers reach families. And families ask questions. That is how the lie began to crack. The real Joseph Sear's identity had not disappeared. The real man still existed. And when reports of Dr. Joseph Sear began to travel, the truth moved with them. Eventually, the Royal Canadian Navy received the kind of message no captain wants to receive. There was reason to believe their medical officer was an imposter. Imagine that moment. You are on a warship. Your doctor has treated your crew. He has handled emergencies. People believe he has saved lives. Then a message arrives saying he may not be a doctor at all. For the men aboard the Cayuga, the revelation was hard to accept, because their own eyes seemed to argue against it. How could a fake doctor have done what he did? How could an imposter remain calm in surgery? How could a man with no proper training survive inside a role where mistakes could kill? That is what makes Damara's story so disturbing. He was not exposed because he was obviously incompetent. He was exposed because reality finally caught up with the paperwork. When confronted, the lie began to fall apart. The man everyone knew as Dr. Joseph Sear was revealed as Ferdinand Waldo Damara, not a naval surgeon, not the man he claimed to be, not the person written on the documents, just another mask in a long career of deception. The Canadian Navy was embarrassed. This was not just a personal scandal. It was an institutional failure. A man had walked into the military medical system using another person's name and had been placed in a position of life and death responsibility. But the strangest part is what happened next. Damara was not treated like a monster by everyone who knew him. Some people remembered him as friendly. Some remembered him as charming. Some remembered that his patients survived. That is one of the most uncomfortable parts of this case. Ferdinand Damara was a fraud, but he was not easy to explain. He did not fit the simple image of a villain who only wanted money. He seemed to want recognition. He wanted status. He wanted to be someone important without taking the long, difficult road required to become that person. In his mind, maybe the title mattered more than the truth, but the truth still mattered. Because trust is the foundation of medicine. When a patient sees a doctor, they are not just trusting a person. They are trusting years of training. They are trusting exams, licenses, institutions, and rules. They are trusting that the system has already checked what they cannot check for themselves. Damara exploited that trust. Even if some patients survived, the danger was real. A lucky outcome does not erase a lie. After the Navy incident, Damara did not simply disappear into shame. He kept moving. He continued to create new identities and enter new roles. He became connected to jobs and titles that did not belong to him. He researched. He reinvented himself again and again. But fame had changed the game. Once the world began to know him as the great imposter, it became harder to hide. A mask only works if no one has seen the face underneath. And eventually, the face underneath became famous. Still, the question remains. How did he fool so many people? The answer is not that everyone around him was stupid. That would be too easy. The real answer is more unsettling. He fooled systems because systems are made of people. And people are often trained to trust signals. A title. A uniform. A confident introduction. A document. A recommendation. A room where everyone else seems to believe. Most people do not want to be the one who asks the embarrassing question. Most people do not want to accuse someone important without proof. And when a person acts like they belong, the world often moves aside and lets them pass. Damara understood this deeply. He did not need to know everything. He only needed to know enough to survive the next question. He did not need to be a real doctor at first. He only needed to look enough like one to get through the door. Then, once inside, every person who accepted him became part of the disguise. If the Navy accepted him, others trusted him. If officers trusted him, sailors trusted him. If patients survived, the legend protected him. That is how a lie becomes a life. Not all at once. One door at a time. Ferdinand Waldo Damara died in 1982. By then, his story had inspired books, articles, and a Hollywood film. To some, he became a strange folk legend, a man who could become anyone, a master of confidence, a brilliant imposter. But behind the legend is a warning, because every scam begins with the same quiet question: who do you trust? Damara's greatest trick was not pretending to be a doctor. It was convincing people that they had no reason to check. And that is the part that still matters today. Because fake identities did not disappear with paper documents and old uniforms. They only changed form. Today, the fake doctor may not walk onto a warship. He may appear online. He may wear a title in a profile. He may use a stolen photo. He may build a perfect resume. He may speak in the language of authority until people stop asking for proof. The tools have changed. But the weakness is the same. We trust what looks official. We trust what sounds confident. We trust what everyone else seems to accept. And sometimes that is exactly what the scammer is counting on. Ferdinand Damara built a life on lies. For years, he became other people. He wore their names. He entered their professions. He borrowed their respect. But the most dangerous identity he ever stole was not just a name. It was trust. This was the Scam Files. True stories, fake lives, real consequences.